Hello everyone, today we're going to be reading Don't Be Silly Mr. Twiddle. Mr. Twiddle and the Snow. It was a very snowy day. Mr. Twiddle hoped that Mrs. Twiddle wouldn't want him to go out in it. It was difficult to walk in thick snow, and Mr. Twiddle felt that he would much rather sit by the fire and read the paper. But as soon as he heard Mrs. Twiddle's voice, "I hope you are not going to sit indoors this fine day, Twiddle. The sun is out now. It will be good to go out. Will you fetch me some fish from the fishmonger's?" Twiddle groaned. He knew that he would have to. He put on his galoshes, his coat and hat, took a basket and set out. Some children were having a fine time that day. They were making snowballs and throwing them, they were building snowman, and they were sliding down the big hill nearby on sledges. Mr. Twiddle had quite a time dodging snowballs and sledges. Then he stood still and watched some children at the top of the hill making a very big snowball indeed. "We're going to roll it down the hill until it will get bigger and bigger," they cried. Mr. Twiddle watched as they began to roll the big ball downwards. Halfway down it was very big indeed. Then it began to roll down by itself, like a round avalanche. It came down more and more quickly, and Twiddle tried to hop out of the way. But he was too late, and the great big snowball struck him very hard indeed. Mr. Twiddle was knocked right over. But then he was taken onwards by the snowball, which was still rolling and gathering more snow. On and on he went, rolling over and over, getting the snow all around him. Then the snowball stopped in the middle of the village street, which just then happened to be empty. "Didn't it roll well?" shouted the children on the hill. "Let's make another!" They hadn't seen that the snowball had knocked down and taken Mr. Twiddle along with it. They set to work to make another. Mr. Twiddle was buried in the middle of the big snowball. He didn't like it. He had snow down his neck, in his mouth, ears and nose. It was cold and horrid. An old lady came by and she looked in alarm at the snowball. What peculiar noises were coming out of it? What was the matter with it? "Grrr," said Twiddle, growling with anger in the middle of the snowball, trying to get his head out. A little dog came up and barked in excitement. The old lady hurried off to tell a policeman. "There's a snowball behaving in a very strange manner," she told him, "right in the middle of the village street. It said grrr, just like a dog." "I'll see into the matter," said the policeman, looking very surprised. He went off to the snowball and looked at it. What a big one! And what noises came from it! He scratched his head and wondered if he ought to arrest the snowball. Presently some more people came up and looked at the snowball, which was now wriggling a bit here and there, and which was still making strange noises. "What is it?" said everyone. "Is there some animal inside? Who put the snowball here?" Suddenly, out shot Mr. Twiddle's head, and he blinked round at everyone in surprise. The policeman jumped and stared. "Why, this must be some sort of a snowman!" He took out his notebook. "How did you get into the snow? Are you pretending to be a snowman? Did you build the snow up all around yourself?" cried the policeman in surprise. Help me out, please," said Mr. Twiddle. "I've lost my glasses in the snow." "I'll have to arrest you for obstructing the traffic," said the policeman, and wrote in his notebook. "How can I obstruct traffic where there isn't any?" said Twiddle, indignantly trying to get his arms out of the snowball. "Well, you would have obstructed it if there were any," said the policeman. "You come along with me." "How can I? I'm in the middle of this big snowball," said Twiddle. "Do you suppose I like being here? Nobody helps me at all." "Well, you got yourself in, so I suppose you can get yourself out," said the policeman. "When I get out, I'm going to tell you a few things," said Twiddle angrily. "And I shouldn't be surprised to find myself pulling your nose. Now, look here. You can't talk to the police like that," said the policeman crossly. "As soon as you're out of the snowball, I'm going to take you straight to the police station." That made Twiddle feel quite upset. He didn't want to be marched off to the police station. What would Mrs. Twiddle say if she heard he was locked up? He would never hear the last of it. He stopped trying to get out of the big snowball. Perhaps, if he stayed there quietly, the policeman would get tired of waiting and would go away. But he didn't. He began to scrape at the snow to free Twiddle. He badly wanted to take him off to the police station now. He would show Twiddle that he couldn't talk about pulling noses. Goodness knows what would have happened if the children at the top of the hill hadn't sent down another enormous snowball. It came bounding down the hill, getting bigger and bigger as it came. It shot into the village street and arrived at top speed just where the crowd stood watching Twiddle. In a trice, everyone was blowed over and buried in the snow, for the snowball burst all over them. The policeman was right underneath. He lost his helmet, his notebook, and his temper. As soon as Twiddle saw everyone on the ground groping around wildly, he saw his chance of escape. He struck out at the snow surrounding him, managed to get free, found his glasses and rushed off home. He didn't stop till he got there. Then he put on his glasses, brushed down his coat and went indoors. Well, he thought, as he sat down in his chair and picked up the paper. Well, I'm not going out today for anyone in the world. What a time I've had, nearly buried in the snow, almost taken off to prison. Well, well, well. Is that you, Twiddle? Called Mrs. Twiddle. Put the fish in the larder, will you? Twiddle frowned and rubbed his nose. He had forgotten all about the fish. Now what was he to do? Well, he wouldn't say anything at all, and perhaps Mrs. Twiddle wouldn't notice the fish wasn't there, till the next day that she wanted to cook it. But she did notice it. She went down to the larder to cut a bit for the cat, and to her surprise, there was no fish there. Twiddle, there's no fish! The cat must have had it. How many times have I told you not to leave the larder door open? About 600 times, said Twiddle politely. Don't be rude, said Mrs. Twiddle. Well, what a waste, to think all that fish is inside the cat. Go and put on your hat and coat and fetch some more. Twiddle groaned. He went to fetch his hat and coat, and then Mrs. Twiddle appeared too, dressed ready to go out. It's such a nice afternoon, she said. I thought I would come with you. Well, if you're going out, I may as well stay at home, said Twiddle, pleased, and took off his hat. But no, he had to go to keep Mrs. Twiddle company. On the way they met the policeman, who had a black eye because someone kicked him by accident when they had been all knocked over by the snowball. Mrs. Twiddle was very sorry to see it. Ah, said the policeman, stroking his eye gently. I had a bad time this morning. I was just about to make an arrest of a man who was obstructing the traffic and being very rude to me when a big snowball kicked me down, and my prisoner escaped. What bad luck, said Mrs. Twiddle. Fancy the man being rude to you. I wondered what he dared to do. He said he would pull my nose, said the policeman. Mrs. Twiddle clicked her tongue in horror and then walked on with Twiddle, who hadn't said a word all the time. Wouldn't you believe it, said Mrs. Twiddle in a tone of horror. Well, Twiddle, silly though you are sometimes, I'm sure you would never be rude to a policeman. And still, Twiddle never said a word. Well, there wasn't anything he could say. Poor Twiddle. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, it was me, Mira. Bye-bye!